When pricing a Webflow project, there are a number of different factors that you must take into consideration. If you don't do this, you could end up losing money on the project. So in this video, what I want to do is walk you through all of those different factors and things that you must consider when pricing out your project. Now, these different factors are going to help you predict the extent of each project, how much input there's going to be, and then you're going to be able to accurately price your projects so you're making a good profit. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is pricing your project per page. Now, this is, in the world of web design and development, by far the easiest way to quantify how big the project's going to be. And so going based off the number of pages that you're going to be designing and developing is going to be a great way for you to accurately price your project. Now, the hope is that when you first meet with a potential client, they already know how many pages they need built, or at least they have a ballpark. Now, if they don't have this, you can either send them back to prepare some sort of wireframe or outline and then talk to them on another call, or you can walk through it right there with them on the call. And while this might take a little extra time, it's a good way for you to understand their project and to build trust during that call. But either way, you need to make sure that before you price a project or commit to a project, you know exactly how many pages it's going to be. The next thing you need to consider is charging based on the complexity of the design. Now, obviously, a page that has very basic content and images and animations is going to cost you much less time and money than something that's extremely complex. And so these are the questions that you need to ask your client to see what their expectations are as far as all of the moving parts and pieces and just how complex or long those pages are going to be. Because if you don't do this, you might charge them for a 5-page website, but each of those pages could be crazy long with a ton of complex interactions and animations and illustrations. And before you know it, it's going to go way beyond what you expected and you're going to lose money. So make sure you understand the complexity of each page. Next, you need to make sure that you're charging according to the timeline. And what that means is if it's a shorter timeline or the client expects it to be done sooner than maybe you're comfortable with, you should be charging extra for that. Because if you're cramming an 8-week project into 3 weeks, that's going to take your time, attention, and focus away from other projects. And so you need to charge accordingly. Next, you need to charge for interactions. A lot of times when using Webflow, it's easy for us just to charge for the site and then we get halfway into the project and the client says, ooh, I want to use a bunch of fancy interactions. And we just do it without discussing maybe an additional fee on top of that. Now, you don't want to get in this situation, so instead you should ask questions at the start of the project as far as their expectations for animations. And if they want them, make sure that you adjust the price accordingly. Next, and probably my most important, is charging for CMS creation. Now, Webflow's content management system is super powerful, and I've had several clients that it saved them tens of thousands of dollars throughout the year in site maintenance and site update fees. And so being able to build a really well-functioning CMS setup is going to make a huge difference for your clients. There's a ton of value there, and so you need to price accordingly. Those aren't just additional pages, but that is a lot of logic and different things going into building a CMS that works and saves them time and money. So make sure that when it comes to CMS, you're asking the right questions, understanding the complexity of what they need, and then charging accordingly. Also, you need to make sure that you're charging extra for stock photos, stock videos, and illustrations because these fall outside of the umbrella of web design and development. It's a whole different service. And so even if you offer that service, don't just throw that in as an add-on. If you get into the project and the client says, oh yeah, if you could just go buy 20 stock photos for the site, you have to say, well, we don't cover that. And so that's a fee that you're going to have to cover. And again, setting expectations at the beginning of the project is going to be a great way to avoid those uncomfortable situations, but make sure that you're charging accordingly for those additional design services because they do take time and money and effort and expertise. Another thing that you're going to want to make sure of is that you're charging for changes in scope. Now, this one might go without saying, but if mid-project or towards the end of the project, a client wants you to do additional work, additional pages, additional designs, whatever it might be, if there's a change in the scope that was agreed upon at the start of the project, you need to charge extra. Don't just do extra free work just because you feel uncomfortable about talking to the client about it. And unfortunately, I do think that there are clients out there, while the majority of the time I feel like most are genuine good people, there are some that will try to take advantage of you. And so don't let that happen. Make sure that you're charging accordingly for extra work that wasn't agreed upon. A lot of clients are also going to want different integrations plugged into their Webflow site. And if you have the knowledge and the expertise to get these plugins or extensions working within their Webflow site, you should be charging for that expertise. Another thing that I like to do is charge for delays in content. And what I mean by this is, if a client says they're going to get content ready for a specific page or for the whole site by a specific date and they don't do that, you should have something in your agreement that says we're going to charge extra for those delays. Now, I want you to know that I don't do this just to make an extra buck, and I rarely enforce this rule, but charging for these types of things puts a little more pressure on our clients to not delay the project. And so by putting these things in place, you're going to make sure that you keep your client on track, your team on track, and you're going to have the proper expectations so you can hit benchmarks and deadlines and finish the project on time. Another thing that I always charge for is basic SEO setup. So if you're going through and doing title tags, meta descriptions, alt text, whatever it might be, any sort of SEO expertise that you are putting into the project, you should be charging extra for that, because that's something that goes, again, beyond the umbrella or the realm of just design and development. And so make sure you take that into account. This next one is something that we've run into a lot recently as more and more businesses start using Webflow and have existing Webflow sites, and that is charging extra for messy classes or a website that's incredibly unorganized. And what I mean by this is, if you have a client that says, hey, we want you to build a couple additional pages on top of our existing website, and you get into that website and it's a total disaster and the classing system is a mess, that's going to take a lot of time for you to clean that up and then integrate your new designs and pages and classes into that existing website. And so make sure you either charge them to go back and rebuild the whole thing properly, or at least charge for the additional struggle and pain that is going to cause you trying to integrate your new pages into the existing site. Next, you need to take into account how much communication the client is going to want. And if they want an unreasonable amount of communication, you need to charge accordingly. What I mean by that is, if the client wants to do 3, 4, 5 Zoom meetings a week or wants an update every single day, this is a pain in the butt. So either A, don't take on that client, or B, charge them extra, because you know it's going to be a pain in the butt. A lot of times clients are going to request way too much communication, and while we want to make sure that they are involved in the process, sometimes that can just take away from your time to work on the project. And a lot of time, the things that get discussed on a Zoom call can easily be answered in a quick email or just sharing a Figma or a Webflow link. And so make sure that you're controlling the amount of communication and charging accordingly. And finally, you want to make sure that you're charging for site migration tasks. So anything that has to do with moving over content, moving over SEO data, whatever that might be, it requires a lot of time and a lot of expertise. And so if you are building a new site and then taking everything from their old site and moving it into the new site, make sure that you charge accordingly, because that is going to be a lot of additional work that maybe you didn't anticipate. And you want to make sure the client knows that that is going to be a lot of work that doesn't fall under your umbrella. And while you can do it, you are going to have to charge a little bit extra for the additional hours that it will take. All right, so the last thing that I want to say, and this is really important, you don't ever want your clients to feel like you're gouging them for every little task, every little bit of expertise, every call. You don't want to do that. You want them to feel like your price or your bid is all encompassing and it's going to do everything that they need. And so it's going to be really important for you to ask really good questions so you can understand the project, understand their expectations, their timeline, what they want it to look like, and then you can price it accordingly. The last thing you want to do is say, oh, you want animations? Well, that's going to be an extra $2,000. Oh, and you need a site migration? Well, that's an extra $2,000. You don't need to count it or tally it up right in front of them, but instead in your head, you're just going to be keeping track of everything that needs to be done. So when you do give your final overarching bid for the project, you will have taken all those things into account and you can get it accurate and get it right so you don't lose money on the project. Now, when it comes to being a freelancer, the most important thing is your relationship with your client and that you over deliver and do a great job on every project. And so you're going to have to set expectations at the start, but also you're going to sometimes have to be flexible. And there are times where you're going to have to do a little bit of free work, and that's okay. Don't be too rigid, don't be too uptight, but stick to your guns, stick to the expectations and the scope, and you're going to be able to finish projects more quickly, you're going to be able to charge more, and you're going to have much happier clients. So thanks so much for watching this video. If you haven't quite yet, please subscribe to the channels. I've got new videos like this coming out every single week, and we will catch you in the next video.